Matias, welcome to FeatureOps Summit. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Um, yeah, good. How are you doing?
Very good. Thank you.
I'm super excited to talk to you. It's always interesting to talk to someone who has been in the hot seat, who's kind of lived the glory and the pain of running large scale applications. And so really eager to kind of dive into your perspective. But before we get into that, could you just share a little bit about yourself? Who
Ha-
is Matthias?
Happy. So my name is Matias Undurraga. I've lived or I'm living in Switzerland for about 12 years now, and I've been a customer of AWS for about 11 years and an employee for 4. I'm an enterprise technologist, which kind of roughly translates as a field CTO working with EMEA's top 400 customers, happy or helping them happily to
Mhm.
solve their issues. And most of the time, it's not technology issues, it's issues around the organization, the teams, the culture, um, where we come in with our previous experience and try to help them overcome that.
Awesome. And I think what prepared you for that, presumably, is you've been a CTO, you've been chief product officer, um, and so now you work with some of the largest companies in the world, kind of helping them understand how to solve bigger problems. I'm kind of curious, going back to your role as a practitioner, when you were responsible for uptime and experience and all of that with large scale applications, what kept you up at night?
That's a good question. So it wasn't around the technology. I think most of what keeps me up at night was whether we could move fast without losing control. When you are a CTO or a chief product officer, you're constantly balancing speed, customer experience, reliability, cost, security. And at Amazon, we talk about earning trust. So trust for us is very important. And I believe that was something that also kept me awake. How can we earn the trust of our customers? And it was always a balancing. The business wanted to move faster, product wanted to experiment, engineers just wanted to ship, operations wanted stability, and customers expected that things worked all the time. So we had to always keep, as you said, uptime, but we wanted that trust between us and the different teams to be there. So I think it's a popular discussion now where the hard part is not about writing software. I think today, or writing code today, that we see that more and more uh, true in the sense of AI writing code for you. The hard part is actually operating the change. So at some of the large companies where I work, the biggest challenge was how do we release safely in a live business. You don't want to do a big bang release all the time. We were doing 100 releases a day, and we wanted to test, learn, measure, roll back. And that's why, in a way, I like what we're discussing today, feature ops. It's not only about feature flags, but it's about creating that culture or that operating model where software changes actually live in production, and you can turn them on, off, roll back, roll forward. And that gives companies a way to move faster with control, governance, safety, without losing the steering wheel. So for me, if we sum it up, it was how do we create a system, a mechanism, a safety net where teams can move fast, learn, we can recover without putting the customer or the business at risk.
Um, yeah, very well said. That balance is always hard to achieve. It's like, You can talk about whack-a-mole, or you can talk about like two people pulling on the same rope, and it's like that is the tension between all of these things. I'd love to, if you don't mind, go maybe a little bit to the next level of detail. So, to kind of help elaborate some of these points, I think most of our listeners probably know Just Eats, where you were head of product and technology, and you mentioned a little bit about how what many people call feature management, and we'll get into feature ops here in a minute, but kind of this practice of using feature flags to gradually roll out to enable kill switches. I'm kind of curious within the context of a high growth, high scale consumer application, where user experience is very important, but also where performance is very important. Kind of how your teams used feature management as a core operating principle to manage that tension between product, business, engineering, customers.
Yeah, yeah. So in food delivery, everything is moving, correct?
Yeah.
So you have the customers ordering food, you had the drivers, moving through the city, you had the restaurants. So we call this a three-sided marketplace where you had restaurants, customers, and drivers. And at peak, we were managing, thousands of orders. So a change could impact, our dinner. And there's nothing worse for a customer that's on support calling you and telling you, "Hey, I have two kids. I trusted your platform for you to deliver, and the food hasn't arrived in an hour, and now you're telling me that it will never arrive." So for us, again, going back to that trust, we needed to be able to understand whether a feature was good, bad, turn it on, bypass it, do shadow deployments, canary rollouts, because we wanted to be able to trust our engineers with the process. We wanted to give trust to the operations teams, uh, the driver team. We wanted to make sure that they also trusted our software. Trust is equally important internally to external customers. So for us, the operating model was always, if we have a feature, if we have a change, make sure that we put a feature flag around it, that we can isolate it, that we can start an experiment. And for us, for example, one of the metrics we looked at was 14-day reorder rate. So it was very important that whatever feature we were doing, we wanted to measure it at least within, a window that we were sure we weren't impacting the reorder rate. We wanted to create a habit within our customers, and we wanted to understand whether the features we were deploying were helping to build that habit of reordering. At some point, when I joined the company, we had a slogan that was you know, um, "Don't cook, just eat," and it was all around. Um, Allowing people just to order as many times as they could, are adding different food moments so that it wasn't only about breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Dinner was our highest peak. So for us, always lunch was a good indicator whether things were working, moving into the peak of the day, which was dinner. So again, the framework and the mental model was, let's not lose trust. Uh, we all know the importance of documentation, tests. For us, equally important was the option to build feature flags. And as we spoke before, being able to roll out, being able to quantify the changes so that we knew that we were actually building better experiences. So that becomes for us the operating model. It wasn't then even people thinking whether we needed to do it. It was just part of how we did things. It was
Part
part
of
of the checklist. Yes, it was
part of
part
the
of
culture.
culture. No one would say, "Hey, we're gonna roll this feature out," without even having a feature flag. And most of the features actually rolled out feature flag off. They weren't enabled by default. And sometimes, because we had several teams, so you would imagine a pipeline where you had maybe within the pipeline 100 commits.
Mm,
Commit number two was broken. Instead of us, fixing commits two and rebasing the other 98, we would just, push forward. We knew that everything was off. We would do a commit, I don't know, 101 to fix number two. We would wait for the other teams to make sure that everything was running. And then we would turn it on and we would turn something else, maybe half an hour, see the impact, make sure that we called it a quarantine. So whenever we had a rollout or enabling a feature, there was a quarantine period of about an hour where teams were actively monitoring the KPIs, looking at errors. And once we were all happy, and we knew that it did an impact, we would then keep it. So it was already part of the culture. It allowed us to move faster. It wasn't a burden. I think it was a facilitator.
yeah. You said a lot there that I'd love to dig into, and I'm realizing that, our 30 minutes is going to be quite short because there's so much interesting things there. One thing that you said that around experimentation that I think is particularly interesting is you roll out this feature and is it helping people order more dinner, but it's not just a one time thing. It's you want to look at that reorder rate, and so there's like this fairly complex view of what success looks like. You could look at what's happening in the session, right? Are people clicking the button? And that's relatively easy to manage. But 14 days later, are they coming back and they ordering again? And we call this full stack experimentation within the FeatureOps model, because it's really important for engineers to understand that, right? It's not just the dashboard that you're looking at right now. There's a larger context on what success looks like. And if, I'm an engineer, I'm just concerned with quote unquote building the thing right, right? We roll out this feature, it's not erroring, job done. Yes, like that's good. You're not introducing more errors, you're not introducing more latency, but like, is it driving the business forward? And answering that question it sounds like is the ultimate
Yeah.
for your team. Is that correct?
Yes, and for us, it wasn't about, because as you said, you could measure in the session, was the conversion rate higher, or the number of clicks better. But the reality is that at the end of the day, we as a business, we didn't live on clicks or on conversion rate on a small widget. For us, what we wanted to finally achieve was a habit and building habits. And for us, that building habits, turned into that 14-day reorder window or frequency. For us, we understood that customers would find our overall platform valuable if they would return several times. So we all wanted to kind of align, and I love this phrase, aligning the vectors. So you have all the teams have different vector size, different impact, but when they're all aligned working towards the same goal, which is, let's build the habit in our customers so that the experience is so good that they can come back. I think that's where, again, changing behavior or creating habits becomes so much or so important, rather than just looking at specific sessions, because it doesn't always tell you the full picture.
Yeah, yeah. Well said. I want to turn a little bit to feature ops as a practice. So I think most people are familiar with feature flags. Most people are familiar with feature management. And now we have this concept of feature ops, which brings in cultural practices. And I'm kind of curious. It's a relatively new term, but I think the concepts are not new. What's your take on feature ops?
Yeah. So I really like the term feature ops because as you said, it expands the conversation. I think if I go back maybe 15 years in my career, I look at it as the DevOps. When it came out, you build it, you own it, you run it. At Amazon, we're really good at doing that, and having teams really own their delivery cycle. And for me, as you said, feature management is often understood as flag toggles, rollouts, but feature ops is bigger. It's about how we plan, how do we release, measure, govern the culture, as you said. And I think we need to look at the cycle also. How do we retire? I remember at some point we had we just did like a sprint cleaning of feature flags because I don't know, we had 100,000 lines of code that, you know, we just had at some point bad habits where everything was just turned on by default, and we sometimes you fall into that cycle of, well, I don't have times to go out and clean it. So I think, again, a lot of companies are really good at launching features. They're less good at operating those features. And I think this is where the feature ops comes in. So like we talked before, who owns the feature after it goes live? What are the metrics that tells us that it actually work? um, who has actually the kill switch? Who can turn it on and off? For us, it was mission control. We had a team mission control. We had playbooks. They had access to all of the live tests. They could see the errors. Everything was very clearly identified. So for us, we had like a Jira ticket, experimentation board, feature ops, and then you could tie it back. And then within the login, you also had those ticket IDs. So, rollback plans. Was customer support aware that we were rolling out a new change? Because at the end, people are calling them and asking. And again, I won't say that we were the best at it. We also had to go through that learning curve of, well, we're launching this new feature. Who do we need to email, notified? Where are the mailing lists? Is it a Slack channel? Is it a dashboard? And emails come and go. People miss them. I used to miss them. I get a bunch of them a day. So how is it easy so that we can enable and show everyone without making the process a 4-week rollout? So what's the easiest way? And I think all of that needs to be tied back into feature ops, correct? So it's not only, as we said, or you said before, it's not the feature. And this forces, I want to say forces, engineering, product and operations, customer supports to actually work together. Uh, because they
What
need.
an idea. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You need to bring them in. People need to understand, if I'm doing operations and I'm, the first line of defense, I have my mission control where I'm looking at everything, and I start seeing things go wrong. Well, I need to have that link back to, okay, what was released, what's enabled, where are the error logs coming up from? If I turn it off, will it actually turn off? Because we've also had those that maybe you had a strong cache, or you had a feature that seemed to be wrapped but at the end might have not been correctly wrapped. So what are the escalations? How do they work? And I think this is very relevant for any enterprise, and the bigger the company, the more you kind of look for speed. When I talk to startups, they are already fast. They're I don't think they're looking to go faster. But when I talk to our top 400 large enterprises, the feedback I get is, we want to be a startup. We want to get a startup mentality. How do we, go fast? How does Amazon do it? And I can give everyone a little of insight. Amazon does 50 million releases a year. So during this conversation, we're going to do 1,800 releases, almost one a second. So how do you keep that speed of innovation, correct?
Wow. And I wanna, it's I'm under obligation. It's from the UN now. We're gonna have to turn to AI here in a minute. Otherwise, bad things will happen. But you said something that I want to just underscore, and I think Amazon is a great example of this. 50 million releases. Amazon is, I'm going to say it's an infrastructure provider. I know there's a lot of software, there's a lot of applications and things like that, but as a platform, it's providing infrastructure for customer applications and infrastructure in the software to drive infrastructure. A lot of people don't think about as a quote unquote feature, right? A backend service, an API is not, that's not a feature in the same way that a button is a feature, or a layout as a feature. But we really see feature ops as providing both the framework for managing kind of those traditional application features, as well as the backend services. And I'm kind of curious your take on that. Is like, do you
Yeah.
think about, no, feature ops is really for the front end experiments,
Oh, no, no, no,
and
no. No, no. For us, we started with the front end, which was the easy part, but we really, really fast came to the bottleneck where we needed to bring in feature ops or feature flags into APIs and versioning, and being able to roll out within an API, or having a gateway that would, split traffic between two different APIs, microservices. And within Amazon Web Services, for us, imagine we have 34 regions. Within that, we have 112 availability zones. Being able to deploy the same feature across all of the regions is a long endeavor. So a lot of those features, as you said, they a release starts weeks in advance until everything is released, and then we can enable it. We do also partial rollouts, new API versions, new features within the console, new API schemas, whatever you require. Everything goes through, or we try to wrap it. We're getting really good at, having those feature flags. So for sure.
yeah, yeah. It's, I think, the if one of the main benefits of feature ops is risk mitigation, I think if you look at within an application where the biggest risk is, there's a lot more risk at the API layer, at the backend layer, than there is at the button, right? The button being in the wrong place, or not, there's some CSS overflow and the button's not visible or whatever. It's like, yeah, that's going to create a frustrating experience for a user. But like, if that backend API is not returning the expected result, that can bring the entire application down. And we saw this recently with a bunch of providers who I'm not gonna name right now, because I don't want it to be perceived as throwing anybody under the bus. But like, when the lesson is learned, when companies learn the lesson you're talking about, and you read the postmortem, it's typically, we
We missed
made
a
a
feature flag.
small
Yeah.
backend change that propagated through the network, and then we were down for 5 hours.
Yeah, we didn't have a
And I
kill switch. We didn't have a
yeah,
way to reset. And in my experience, we would see that people would add retries. So you would have a backend API drop, but you would then cascade because the front end was doing three retries, the gateway was doing another three. So you would multiply, you had nine calls. And even if you tried to bring back the service, you would DDoS it because you had this multiplication of retries. So again, it was, sometimes it was, even if I kill it or I release it, I have already a queue of requests that it's just not going to allow me to bring back my service, which is, I think, what we see a lot of the times is, even if the feature flag is there, we forget about those retries, those cache. Maybe it was cache, maybe it wasn't set up correctly. So for sure, there's so much complexity that becomes in this systems. For example, we stopped with retries. We said, hey, we're going to send it once, do a retry, and then stop. There is no looping, or there's no three retries. Where we are in a highly available system where availability is 99.95%. We shouldn't need retries. And if something goes down, then those retries actually work against you. So, yeah.
mm, yeah. Um, how does AI change all of this?
Yeah, yeah. I think AI basically, let's go back into AI. It just adds a multiplier, correct? So what I've seen with teams is that teams were doing two pull requests a week. Now teams are doing, let's imagine, they're great. They're 4x. Maybe they're frontier teams. They're doing 10x. So that means that you're now having 20 pull requests that you need to merge, that you need to think about, that need to ship. So I think in our previous conversation, Michael, we called it the kill switch for AI. So I don't believe it's all AI slop. I don't believe that. I think that you can do AI engineering and you can get production code. I'm guilty. I've gone back to development. I've built my own repos, but I give the agent now clear instructions. This is now on production. It has active users. Make sure within one of the hooks I have is once the agent finishes a feature, wrap the feature around. Prove to me that we can turn it on and off. Use curl, use whatever mechanism. Here's dev chrome tools as an MCP. Go into the browser, click on it, turn it on, go back, take a screenshot, verify that it's there or not there. So I kind of force it, and I think today that's so easy. It's like people who don't want to write test or update documentation or create feature flags. Don't worry, just create the skill, the hook, and it will do it for you. And I think that's the learning. The learning is, if you have 10x more commits, who's reviewing them? Who's validating them? How does your pipeline look like? Because code generation got faster, but then the build phase gets slower. If someone finds a review, are you then creating a bottleneck on the pipeline? um, isn't it easier just to wrap everything around with a feature flag, default off, ship, fix, validate, and then turn it on? And then operations gets difficult because you're shipping more, so now you need to operate more code. How do we make sure that operations is also streamlined? And then everything goes back to the beginning, and I think you said it. Choosing the right thing to build will become the bottleneck, because developers already know how to build the right thing. They know how to accelerate the code. So maybe in the future, it's product managers, becoming the bottleneck of trying to decide what are the real features that my customer need. So that's where you need a lot of feedback. You'll need a lot of those KPIs, metrics, to go back and understand whether the features you're building are good, or are they just making the user experience worse. And I think for me, another clear picture I have is, let's go to SpaceX, because they've been on the news. When you see the cockpit of NASA and you see this dashboard, they have 100 buttons everywhere, and then you go back and you see SpaceX, it's just a screen. And that's what I also used to tell my teams. Don't add 100 features. Most probably your customers doesn't they don't want it. They don't want a Christmas tree full of lights and buttons. They want something streamlined. So sometimes too much means that we're hurting customers.
Okay. Well said. We've got about 2 minutes, and I want to wrap by asking you just to give some advice to our listeners. We have a lot of engineers who are listening to this call, and they might want to work their way up to CTO, kind of have that broader responsibility that you've talked about, the stress that comes with it, but also the reward. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, so I think the CTO role is not the best engineer in the room. It's someone who can actually understand how to make the company better, how to build decisions through technology. It's the one who's understanding the impact it has on teams, product, customers. So for me, it was sorry, understanding the business. How can I help the company be better? What does it really matter to our customers? What are the risks we're taking? How do I balance risks, with the business? And just like an architect, you're doing trade-offs between speed, quality, cost, security, reliability, trust. So I think start thinking about that, and then team leads are in that position where they need to start making those trade-offs. Architects for sure are making those trade-offs, and engineering managers, so start building up as you move up the ladder. See if you like it. It's not for everyone. A lot of my best engineers always said, "I don't want to be a manager. I'm happy as an individual contributor." Then
Yeah.
learn how to operate software, not only how to build it. I think we
Mhm.
all as engineers love to build things, and then we just want to throw it over the fence here. Someone else operate it.
Yeah.
But I think observability incidents, the scars of being on a team meeting at 3 in the morning because you did a migration on the database and the database is not connecting back or whatever. You need to go through those. It forces you to think and build all those.
Yeah.
um, and then understanding the product. It's, as you said, it's not a feature, it's not a ticket, it's what's the impact on the
Yeah.
customer experience.
Yeah.
And I
Well
used
said.
to tell, yeah, I used
Mhm.
to tell teams, tell me what you did for our customers. Don't tell me I shipped 100 features. Tell me, incrementally, how many orders, how did you move frequency, you know, what are the KPIs that really impact the business? And those are your badges. So yeah,
Yeah.
stay close to the
Well,
code,
good.
but get closer to the customer.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect way to end. Thank you so much, Matthias. This has been super enlightening for me. I hope it's been enlightening for our listeners. And yeah, have a great day and appreciate it.
Thank you. You too. Take care. Bye.